Okay, good morning, Mr. Stewart.
Good morning.
So today we'll be doing your STAAR Alternate 2 administration training. I emailed you the presentation. If you could go ahead and pull that up so we can begin and you can just follow along with all of the training materials.
Okay, I'm ready to begin.
Okay. So first thing is to realize that this training does not take place of reading the manuals that are available on TEA's website. I went ahead and printed you this copy so you can have that to look over. If not, as you can see on the second slide, it does have the website that you can go to look at that as well. So one of the first things is the important dates. The last date for test administrators to be trained in test security and confidentiality by campus testing coordinators is March 15th of 2009. So for us, that'll be before spring break. So you're gonna have to make sure that you have signed all of that and done that security training prior to spring break. I know that our campus is doing a training all together, so you'll want to make sure to be there that day. Another important date would be March 18th through the 29th. That's going to be your preview window, and that's when test administrators can preview the student booklets and test administrator instructions for specific questions during this period. It's also to become familiar with the instructions, practice manipulating the test materials, planning those teacher assists, all of those accommodations that you've planned for in the ARDS, and then just applying those accommodations to the student booklet. So I know that we come back from spring break on March the 19th, so we'll actually be 1 day short, so you'll want to be sure to do as much as you can on those first few days back, just to make sure that you have everything ready. I know this is your first time giving the STAAR test, and so just taking that time to familiarize yourself and get everything ready. And plus that gives you time to ask questions or, get feedback from anyone on anything that you don't understand or you need help with. The assessment window will be April 1st through the 23rd. So that'll be 3 weeks and 2 days that you have to give the test. I highly recommend getting those tests done those first few weeks, because you never know if a student is, going to be sick, and so getting them done in a very timely manner is important. There's also no verification window this year, and that's just when we're able to go over the scores and input them, and so that's actually included in that assessment window. So you have to be sure to give us time to be able to put in the test scores. Let's see. So there is a cutoff date for students. Students who enroll new to the district after the first day of testing will not be tested. So if a student comes to you on, April 3rd, you are not required to test that student. But if they do come to you on April 1st, you do have to test them. But after April 2nd, you're not required to test them. Students who transfer within the same district after the first day of the STAAR Alternate 2 testing window, they still must be tested by the district where the student is enrolled. So when you begin the preview window, you want to practice reading the script and following the presentation instructions for the test. You want to review the scoring instructions for test questions and plan teacher assistance for items 2 and 3 in each cluster. You want to review the student booklet and image cards to plan and prepare accommodations for any student who may need an accommodation according to the guidelines outlined in the accommodations section of the test administrator manual. Any presentation of materials or introduction of concepts or topics to a student prior to the administration of the test is considered a serious irregularity and should be reported as such. So basically what that's saying is after you've previewed the test, you can't go back to your classroom and be like, oh, I really need to teach this type of math to my student because it's on the test. So that's definitely an irregularity and you do not want to be doing that. Security procedures for the preview window is that the test administrators may keep test materials until the end of each day, but you need to make sure that when you're checking them out for the entire day, if you're not using them, they must be locked up, and it has to be something that only you have a key to. It can't be a shared area where maybe multiple of y'all have keys, just because it is secure and confidential. Let's see. Campuses may have more than one person authorized to check out materials. For example, you and Ms. Scarborough also will be pulling out testing since you will be sharing the students that are being tested. So as far as the testing window, the STAAR Alt 2 is an untimed assessment, and it does not need to be given in one session. I know that for a lot of our students, that's a lot to handle at once, so it's not necessary to finish it in one session. Make sure to administer the assessment at a time that's most appropriate for the student. So if you have a student who gets really tired in the afternoon or after specials, make sure that you're testing them in the morning when they can do their best job. Be sure to allow breaks as necessary. You can administer the test over several days with several sessions per day, or you can administer the test over several days with one session each day. So items are best tested within the entire 4-item cluster intact, one cluster at a time. So basically what that means is the test is split into 4 different tests, there's clusters of 4 different questions, and so each cluster, the questions build on themselves, so you have to finish those 4 questions before you can take a break and maybe stop the test. Who can administer STAAR? The test administrator should be the student's teacher for the subject tested. The test administrator must have a high level of familiarity with the student so that testing accommodations can be prepared appropriately and the student's typical response modes can be understood. So I know that you working with the students, there's a lot of ways that they answer that you can recognize that maybe others wouldn't see. For example, your student who has the eye gaze, you're able to see how they would answer that choice, whereas someone who's not familiar with that student might be confused and not know what an answer looks like. Certified and non-certified paraprofessionals who are currently employed in the district and routinely work with the student can serve as test administrators or test administrator assistants. The test administrator assistant can provide assistance preparing allowable accommodations, manipulating materials during the testing session, translating or signing information to the student, managing behavior. So you're able to have one of your paraprofessionals in the room with you when you're giving a test. Let's say if one of your students has some behaviors and needs a lot of reassurance to sit down and all of that. So you can have someone in there. They'll just have to be sure to sign the oath and that confidentiality. So if you're going to have a test administrator assistant as well as yourself, you must be trained in test security and administration procedures prior to the assessment. So when our campus has the meeting after school, your paraprofessional will have to come and attend that training and sign the oath and everything, if that is something that you're going to need assistance with. The paraprofessionals must be supervised by a certified professional on the same campus throughout the test administration. So they are not able to give the test by themselves, but they can be there testing as long as a certified professional is with them. So things that are going to be continued this year is the color student booklets. Last year there were limited images in color, but for 2019 student booklet images will be in full color, except for historical photos and images where color is found to be distracting, such as multiple sets of geometric shapes, line drawing that appear more simple in black and white, or etc. Large print booklets are also going to be continued. Those have to be specifically ordered. I don't think none of your students need the enlarged text or images, but they will also continue the image card sets. There will be one card set per student booklet. They have the perforated cards. There's 4 cards. They contain the same images that appear in the student test booklet. It reduces the burden for teacher photocopying and preparation of images, but the photocopying policy has not changed. So if you look on your slide number 11, you'll see some examples of the STAAR alternate to image card sets, and so it just shows that those 4 cards go together within a cluster of questions, and it gives you an example of the front and the back, so you can see question 6. This is the first part of the question, and then there's question 6, the second part. So both of those image cards will go with question number 6. So as far as the materials that you'll get when you're previewing and giving the test is you'll receive 1 student booklet, 1 image card set, you'll get a scoring document, and you'll also get a secure STAAR Alternate 2 test administrator manual for each grade, subject, and course tested. So whether you use the materials or do not, you still have to return the administrator manuals, the student booklets, the scoring documents, the complete image card sets, and anything that you may have photocopied of the secure test materials. So when we're talking about who should take the STAAR Alternate 2, we're talking about students with significant cognitive deficits. Characteristics of students with significant cognitive disabilities: they may have an intellectual quotient below 70, resulting in limited potential. They may be unable to academically reach grade level regardless of the quality of instruction. They may have poor social adaptability, resulting in dependence on others for daily living and employment, and differs from students with learning disabilities who have average intelligence but have learning problems that make reaching their potential difficult. This does not mean that the student's disability must be intellectually disabled, but it should not be a learning disabled student. So this is any student who is labeled LD should not be taking this STAAR Alternate 2. The STAAR Alternate 2 is an assessment for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities who exhibit significant intellectual and adaptive behavior deficits in their ability to plan, comprehend, and reason, and also indicate adaptive behavior deficits that limit their ability to apply social and practical skills such as personal care, social problem solving skills, dressing, eating, using money, and other functional skills across life domains. They are not identified based on English learner designation or solely on the basis of previous low academic achievement or the need for accommodations. So just because a student is an English learner and they're, significantly behind, you cannot decide that they take STAAR tests just based off of that English learner designation. They require extensive, direct, individualized instruction, as well as a need for substantial supports that are neither temporary nor specific to a particular content area. So these are going to be accommodations and modifications that are across the board. It's not just going to be for reading or for math. So the responsibilities of the ARD committee. The general assessment, the STAAR, is the first consideration. If STAAR, with or without accommodations, does not appear to be appropriate for the student, you as the ARD committee must review the STAAR alternate participation guidelines to determine if the student is eligible for STAAR alternate. So if you look at the slide, it gives an example of the participation requirements that you'll have to fill out for each of your students that is taking the test. So you have to identify who is completing the form. This person is responsible for making sure that the committee discusses each section. They should be a member of the ARD committee, and these forms should be completed during the ARD committee meeting when assessment decisions are made. So looking at the STAAR Alternate 2 participation requirements, the first step is reviewing the 5 different criteria that you have to answer. So the first question is, does the student have a significant cognitive disability? This is going to be found when you're looking at the student's full individual evaluation, their FIE, and that's where you're going to find maybe their you're going to be looking at their significant cognitive disability, and you're going to be looking, let's see. So the FIE must indicate a deficit in the student's ability to plan, comprehend, and reason. So with that, you're going to have to enter justification that must include data from the FIE as evidenced by intellectual and adaptive evaluation information. So you're going to be looking at their IQ to see, do they have a significant cognitive disability? The second part is, does the student require specialized extensive supports to access the grade level curriculum and environment? So that's asking, a student with a significant cognitive disability requires repeated specialized supports and materials beyond the support typical peers require. The student uses substantially modified materials to access information in alternate ways to acquire, maintain, generalize, demonstrate, and transfer skills across all settings. But they must also demonstrate adaptive behaviors that are significantly impaired. These most likely will impact the student's ability to live independently and will require specialized supports for the student to function safely in daily life across all life domains, not necessarily just in the school environment. The third part is, does the student require intensive, individualized instruction in all instructional settings? A student with a significant cognitive disability requires classroom assessments administered in alternate or non-traditional methods to demonstrate acquisition. Let's see. They require individualized instruction that is neither temporary nor limited to specific content areas. So like with your students, they're getting one-on-one instruction all day, so that would definitely be a yes. The fourth part is, does the student access and participate in grade level TEKS through prerequisite skills? So if all across the board they are learning at a very prerequisite level, your students are in a live class. So for the most part, that would be a yes. So for instance, an elementary student may be 3 to 4 levels below grade level instruction, while a student in high school could be 7 to 9 levels below. And then the last question is the STAAR Alternate 2 assessment determination based on the student's significant cognitive disability and not any other factors? So it cannot be based on their racial or economic background, English learner status, excessive or extended absences, location of service delivery, anticipated disruptive behavior, emotional distress, or any other factor. So it has to be based completely off of their significant cognitive disability. With that, all 5 of those questions must be answered yes in order for them to take the STAAR alternate 2. Let's see. The evidence of a cognitive disability must be verified by an assessment specialist and be based on valid assessment data. After that, you discuss assurances. This is a job that the principal would do during the ARD, and following that, then you'll have to think about the accommodations that will go along with that. Let's see. Regarding participation, it's not given to everyone with a particular disability. For example, just because a student is eligible for special education and their coded ID for intellectual disability, it doesn't automatically mean that the STAAR alternate 2 is the right assessment. Placement does not determine what assessment the student should take. So for example, the fact that you have a self-contained classroom, that doesn't automatically put them into the STAAR 2 category. You still have to follow those forms and all of that. It could also go vice versa. So a student with a significant cognitive disability could be in general ed for much of the day with support and still be eligible to take the STAAR alternate 2. So it goes vice versa. There's a medical exception form. This is for students who are unable to respond to test questions due to a terminal or degenerative illness. Student who is receiving extensive short-term medical treatment due to a medical emergency or a serious injury or an accident. Also, students who are unable to interact with peers or education without risk of infection or contamination of himself or herself or others. And then student is unable to receive sufficient or consistent homebound services due to medical issues. So medical exception is definitely not something that we see often, but it is something that can be given to students. There's also a NAR, which is no authentic academic response. So a NAR is basically the student must meet 2 of the eligibility requirements. So the first one would be because of multiple impairments, the student is unable to receive information during instruction and assessment. For example, the student may have a combination of visual, auditory, or tactile impairments. And the second eligibility criteria is the student is consistently unable to provide an authentic academic response during instruction. His or her behavior may be described by one or more of the following. They're unable to demonstrate a meaningful, observable reaction to a specific stimulus. They exhibit only startled responses. They track or fixate on objects at random and there's not a purpose. Moves or responds only to internal stimuli, or vocalizes intermittently regardless of changes in the environment around him or her. So this is definitely not something that you see often. In order to have a NAR, we're talking very, very low functioning students. So all of your students who, can react to different stimulus throughout the classroom, if, they can make that eye contact when you're reading a story, if they can, point to something, they're definitely not, they're giving you an authentic response, whereas these students, there's not really anything authentic to their responses. So the alignment with the state curriculum through federal and state laws is a critical requirement of the STAAR Alternate 2. So they developed the vertical alignment document and curriculum framework documents to help students with significant cognitive disabilities access the grade level TEKS curriculum. So I know that your students are learning at a prerequisite level, and so the vertical alignment is a really good tool for you to use to see how you can scale things down, so your students are still focusing on that same TEK, but just at a prerequisite level. For example, accessing the grade level TEKS academic content standards for students with significant cognitive disabilities. They're going to start with the TEKS. These identify what Texas students should know and be able to do at every grade in the required mathematics, reading, science, social studies, and writing curriculum. The TEKS vertical alignment for the STAAR Alternate 2 is a complete list of the TEKS academic content standards from pre-kindergarten through the exit level for required mathematics, reading, science, social studies, and writing curricula. The essence statement, that is the summary of the STAAR reporting categories, knowledge and skills statements, and the student expectations tested on the STAAR test. And then there's the TEKS curriculum framework for STAAR Alternate 2. This links the prerequisite skills to the specific knowledge and skills statements and student expectations for mathematics, reading, science, social studies, and writing curriculum. So there's instructional terms and lists. So for example, in grade 3 mathematics, it's important to know the words graph, picture graph, number sentence, skip counting, volume, capacity, knowing the symbols of, plus, minus, equals, cents, dollars, the coins, penny, nickel, dime, quarters, cents, equals, models, different shapes. So those are instructional terms that will be used with that. And then it goes on to give more examples in the grade 4 mathematics test, grade 5 mathematics. So it gets a little more difficult as the grade goes up, but it's still definitely at a prerequisite level. There's also universal terms list, and that's, for example, completes, best, mainly, correct, describe, represents, activity, value, relationship. So those are common words that will be seen on the presentation of the STAAR Alternate 2. So the test design, each question measures a targeted prerequisite skill. Each of the essence statement has 4 questions that form a cluster and test a common skill or concept at varying levels of difficulty. The 6 clusters comprise a test, resulting in 24 questions per test. The clusters have the following characteristics. The 4 questions are scaffolded based on the grade level of the prerequisite skill and what the student is being asked to do. The first question is always going to be the easiest of the 4 questions in a cluster, moving to the last and most cognitively complex question. The cluster design requires the student to make only 6 concept transitions throughout the test. So each cluster has a concept, so they really get to focus on that, and then move on to only 6 different concepts throughout the test. Each student, regardless of ability, is expected to attempt all questions. So regardless of how high functioning or low functioning, they do have to answer questions 1 through 4, even if maybe question 1 is very easy for them, or question 4 is just cognitively too high. They have to at least attempt to answer. Okay, so if you look at slide 37, you'll see an example of a question. So it gives you the presentation instructions for question 1, And so the first thing that you're going to do is present stimulus 1. And so you can do this either with the student booklet or you can do it with the cutout cards that they give you. So the first thing is you're going to show them that, and you're going to direct the student to the circle. Then you're going to communicate this is a circle. And then you're going to direct the student to the outline of the circle, and you're going to communicate find the circle. When you see the word direct, it indicates an action for the test administrator. For example, the test administrator may need to bring certain parts of the stimulus image to the student's attention. This can be done in a variety of ways depending on the student's need. So when it tells you direct, like you want to bring the attention of your student to that aspect of the test. The student can be alerted orally or through sign as to where to look or focus. The student's hand can be guided to specific places in the stimuli or paired with items for the student to explore what can be placed in the student's hand. Sections can be pointed to or highlighted as they are mentioned in the instruction. Parts of the stimulus can be covered up until explained in the instructions to focus attention and avoid stimulation. Answer choices can be color-coded, numbered, or labeled with the letters to direct the student to a specific place as long as the format is equally applied to all answer choices. So for example, if a student loves the color blue, you cannot use a blue highlighter on the correct answer choice for everyone. You have to make sure that it's equally applied. Equal time and treatment must be provided for each answer choice so that a correct answer is not emphasized. Like I said, you can't use something that the student likes to bring their attention to the correct answer. Anything bold-faced statements in the questions are to be communicated to the student as written without paraphrasing, substituting vocabulary, or providing additional details. So where it says this is a circle, that's what you say, this is a circle. The find statement is constant for all question types, but the word find can be substituted with the words point to, show me, touch, or tell me. The find statement can be changed to a question format. Where is the circle versus find the circle? So with that find statement, you have a little more leniency of using the language that best works with your students. So for example, if all year long you've been working with touch the circle, then that's something that you can use for the questions. When you're scoring, so if the student finds the circle, you would mark A for question 1 and move on to question 2. If the student does not find the circle, you have to remove the circle, wait at least 5 seconds, and then replicate the initial presentation instructions. So you're just going to start over from there after you've waited 5 seconds. After the 5-second wait time, if the student finds a circle, you would mark B for question 1 and move on to question 2. But if after the 5-second wait time, if the student does not find the circle, you would mark C for question 1 and move on to question 2. So for each question, the only answer choices is A, B, or C. And it's based on did the student get it right the first time? Did they need that provided accommodation? And did that help them get the question right? That would be a B. And if they do not after the 2 tries, then you would mark C. Specific instructions are given for exactly what the student must find to get credit for the question, so it lays it out for you exactly on what they must do to get that credit. If an incorrect response is given, the test administrator is directed to remove the stimulus, wait 5 seconds, and then repeat the instructions. No extra assistance is allowed because the answer is provided and modeled during the presentation. So an example of question 2 is this is a circle, and then you would show this house is made of shapes. Find the circle on the house. So when you're directing the student to the house, Options for present, direct, and communicate are provided in the test administrator manual. The test administrator will use the option most appropriate for the student. So if you look on your presentation instructions, you'll see that there's an asterisk on the test administrator instructions that indicates the correct answer. So if they were to point to anywhere near the asterisk, you would see that that's a correct answer. So when you're scoring question 2, you'll see that if the student does not find the circle in the house on the first try, that you can model the desired student action by finding the circle and communicating, here's the circle on the house, and then replicate the presentation instructions. The test administrator should model the student action using the most likely way the student would be expected to respond when communicating the answer. So when you're modeling that, you want to do it exactly how you would expect them to give that answer. Looking at question number 3, you would direct the student to each shape and you would say circle, square, triangle. Find the shape that has 3 sides. So if the student does not find the triangle, this one, it gives you options. The first option you can do is have the student identify the number of sides each shape has. You could trace the outline of each shape, or you could highlight the outline of each shape. And following that, then you would replicate the initial instructions. Looking at question 4, there's a lot less direction for the student, and so you would give the 3 options and you'd say, find the 2 shapes that have the same number of sides. So the student has to determine, does the circle and triangle have the same number of sides? Do the square and rectangle, or the triangle and rectangle? When you're scoring question number 4, this one does not have any test administrator actions. If they were to get it wrong, all you have to do is replicate the initial presentation instructions. Looking at accommodations, for STAAR Alternate 2, TEA defines accommodations as changes to materials or procedures that enable students with disabilities to participate meaningfully in learning and testing. It is critical that students with disabilities are provided access to the assessment through careful use of accommodations wherever appropriate. The accommodations must maintain the integrity of the assessment, avoid leading to or providing the student a direct answer, be used routinely in instruction. You are not giving students an accommodation that you're not already using in the classroom, because if the students don't know the accommodation and they don't know how to use them, it's not going to be beneficial for them when they are taking the STAAR Alt 2. It must reflect the student's learning styles, and allowing a student to respond using a mode that is appropriate for the student. So for example, you're not going to get enlarged text for a student who doesn't have a visual impairment. Accommodations may be used only if they meet criteria above and are listed in the student's IEP. Possible allowable accommodations, and this is going to be, when you go into art, this is going to be separate than the accommodations that you're choosing for daily instruction. This is going to be under the STAAR accommodation. So there's going to be 2 different sections that you're going to put that on. Some allowable accommodations are going to be color and highlight images or text, place color overlays on images and text, pair images or text with photographs, picture representations, or real objects of the same content, attach textured materials to images or text, demonstrate concepts or relationships in images or text, raise or darken the outline in images or text, enlarge images or text, add braille labels to images to provide text in braille, Describing images for students with visual impairments. Provide images or text on a separate paper presented at one time. If you were to do this one, it must be presented in the same order or configuration as they appear in the text booklet. You can cover or isolate images or text until addressed. If you have a student who you really need to focus on one part, and if you're giving everything at one time, it might overwhelm them, that's definitely a good one to use. Using routine picture representations for keywords and verbal directions to the student. Calculators, manipulatives, math tools to arrive at a response, rereading sections of the text, and providing structured reminders. So this could be personal timers, token systems, color-coded, handwritten reminders, or visual schedules. So if that's something that you're using with your students every single day, you know, a first then board, token board, that's definitely something that you would want to include. Okay, accommodations to limit number of images shown at one time, providing the stimulus on separate paper presented once at a time, cover or isolate each image as it is addressed. The guidelines to that is all images must be presented in the same order as the text booklet, and all cover-up techniques must be uniformly applied to all images within an item. If accommodations to language used in test administrated instructions, the allowable accommodations would be using routine picture representations for keywords and verbal directions to the student, and also rereading sections of the text as requested by the student. Guidelines for that, with the exception of words of encouragement, no additional information other than what is visually presented, stated in text, or supplied in the text administrator instructions can be provided. So besides that, encouraging your students, there's not a whole lot that you are able to add. So when we're talking about response modes, it's going to look different for each student that you're working with. Every student should be given an opportunity to respond using a mode that is appropriate for him or for her. Response modes provide different ways for a student to respond to assessment questions. They help students with visual and hearing impairments, physical disabilities, and organizational problems to communicate their answer to the test administrator. The student may respond using his or her primary mode of communication. The critical issue is not how the student responds, but that the student clearly communicates the preferred answer choice to the test administrator. Student responses may be verbal, physical, or visual. Examples of verbal responses could be stating responses using word approximations, communicating yes or no and provided answer choices once at a time and being asked, is this the blank? Use of an output device to indicate the answer. Making a negative vocalization to indicate unmatched object, describing the location of the answer, or responding ABC, 1, 2, 3, or with the color name if answer choices are labeled as such by the test administrator. Some examples of physical responses would be pointing to, reaching for, touching an answer, highlighting, circling, coloring, or marking a response, head nodding, smiling, or gesturing to indicate yes or no. Writing or typing answers with or without the use of adaptive writing equipment, signing an answer, nodding head or gesturing in the direction of an answer, or placing a flag on the answer. Examples of visual responses could be gazing, blinking, winking, fixating on, isolating answer choices in a section organizer such as a calendar box, tubs, or eye gaze board. If you look at the example on this slide, that's something that I definitely recommend if you are working with a student who's going to be doing eye gazing, blinking, fixating on, being able to use those cards that are given to you during preparation. putting them up where it's easily to see which one they're choosing, that really helps. As far as reading the test, students are not required to independently read the reading test. You'll generally see something like this in the presentation instructions, so it'll tell you to communicate the title and the text. For the writing test, students are not required to write. They edit, they use grammar, they spell, etc. So there's not actually any formal writing on the test. When you're repeating reading passages, test administrators have the option of starting a reading passage over and repeating the text from earlier questions in a cluster if they feel that the student needs to hear the previous sections of the passage before finding what is requested. When you're repeating the presentation instructions, they can be alerted back to the task or materials to be encouraged to stay focused at any time during testing. Students can request to have information repeated before the find statement is given. After the find statement is given, once the answer choices and find statement have been given, the test administrator must wait for the student to respond without repeating any parts of the instruction or gesturing back to any stimulus images. If no response is given after a reasonable wait time, the answer choices and find statement can be repeated once. If a student responds incorrectly, the teacher assistance has been applied and the initial presentation is being replicated. The order in which the answer choices and find statement are communicated to the student can be switched from that provided in the initial presentation. If you have a student who's using assistive technology that is documented on the student's IEP and is used routinely in instruction may be used to provide the student access to the assessment. The only instance when a device or procedure would not be allowed include tablets or computers with internet access that cannot be turned off, or inputting answer choices into a device that has stored memory that cannot be replaced. You've got to remember this is a secure test, so if the memory cannot be erased, then it's not something that you can use. Here's an example of your recording scoring document. After the student responds to each question, the test administrator will evaluate the response according to the scoring documents. The ABC determinations for each question, along with the accommodations used during the assessment, must be entered into TestNav, and that's something that the principals will do, or the testing coordinator. The form must be returned in the non-scorable shipment. Confidentiality. No person may reveal or discuss the contents of a test booklet or secure portion of a test administrator manual before, during, or after a test administration unless specifically authorized to do so by the procedures outlined in the test administration materials. If circumstances necessitate that a test booklet or secure portion of the test administrator manual be examined, permission must first be obtained from TEA. At the end, you can see that you can visit the TEA STAAR Alternate 2 page periodically to keep up with any information and training. There's also a Region 10 Google site. Any updates will be there based on this PowerPoint presentation. And if you need any more information, there's contact info of the Region 10 consultant. There's also the Region 10 coordinator, who you can contact at TEA, the Student Assessment Division. It gives a phone number, an email, and a webpage if there's any questions. Obviously, you can come to me if you have any questions, and I can do that contact for you. And we will continue the STAAR training next week, where we can do our confidentiality and finish up all of that other stuff. So thank you for coming to this training.